Well, I was working with ethical investment and struggling against a lot of negativity. So it was wonderful to have somebody like Ned who believed in what we were doing, along with many other people. But there were a lot of people who just didn't believe that it was a contradiction in terms. You can't try to apply ethics to investment because immediately any returns would disappear from it. And in fact, the opposite is exactly the case.
Hello, I'm Sal, your channel host. In this series I've been talking with members of the NED Foundation board, and as is fairly common for organisations of this kind, people develop both a personal and a professional relationship with the founder. That's certainly the case for today's guest, Damien Lynch. They first met at an ethical investments conference, and Ned recognised that he needed someone with the skills of Damien to help him with his investments. And over a period of time they did this work, and Ned eventually asked Damien to join the board. So I'll let Damien tell the story from rather a different point of view of some of the other interviews that we've seen, where the focus has been on community development or that kind of thing. So here's Damien.
I'm Damien Lynch. I live at Wentworth Falls in the Blue Mountains. It's a good question how long I've been associated with Ned. I can't actually remember when I first met him. I think I was setting up an investment organisation, and he would have been one of the many tens or hundreds of people who inquired about what we were doing. And somehow or other I got to know him. I mean, knowing Ned, he wouldn't have just been a passive investor. He would have wanted to talk to the people involved and get to know them. So somewhere there in the past, that's how I got to know Ned, I'd say. It took a long time for me to find out who or what he really was. He talked me into going to a social developers network seminar, and that's when I really got to understand that he had a deep social conscience and was very open and supportive of the world and that sort of activity that was going on. Well, I was working with ethical investment and struggling against a lot of negativity. So it was wonderful to have somebody like Ned who believed in what we were doing, along with many other people. But there were a lot of people who just didn't believe that it was a contradiction in terms. You can't try to apply ethics to investment because immediately any returns would disappear from it. And in fact, the opposite is exactly the case. Well, I did go to a number of SDN meetings and got to know him better, and he invited me to have a look at what his investments were and how he was going, just on an informal basis. And over time he decided he wanted to employ me to look at it on a part-time basis, and I got to know him quite well. He was sort of like a father figure in many ways. He was very open, very easy person to talk to. He didn't have, I mean, he was an important person in many ways to many people, to myself included, but he never gave that impression. He was just himself and would talk to you as an equal, and he was an amazing man and made you feel at ease. Well, I'd always been interested in, I guess, what you call social development, and the first SDN I went to, I just felt, this is home. I feel really supported here, and was very happy with the whole process. I do sometimes find I get a bit frustrated with the way some people talk on. I just think, come on, get on with it. We know where we're going here, but people do want to stress things and work it over and over and over in my mind. But overall, it's a highly satisfying process. And of course, it doesn't finish when an SDN is finished. You get to meet people you form new relationships. I went to a number, not a lot, I've been to 3 or 4. This is a good process. I feel really supported here. It's like a refresher. Of course, the idea of the SDN is, okay, you can tell people what you're doing, other members, but it's also a support group who will support you. And I was working very much on my own. I was with a company, had a board, had employees, but one can feel very much on your own, especially when you're doing something totally new and totally different. And to have a group of people who will firstly listen to you and then in a caring way give feedback is very, very strong, very supportive. It's a bit of personal development and a bit of professional. In my case, I think we men sometimes find it hard to open up, and we talk things through as a professional level, but the personal part does come through. And there have been times when maybe not at a social developers network itself, but where the people I've got to know through there would support me on a personal level. I've been lucky in that I have down periods and up periods, but generally I'm fairly balanced. So I haven't needed a great amount of personal development assistance, although of course you do need it. And my wife Marilyn is a great support to me, always has been. And there are various other friends who will be a support. I've got 1 or 2 male friends who, if I really feel that I need to discuss something on a personal level with, I can give them a call or go and have a cup of coffee, and that's a great support. Well, I just looked at his portfolio, and I specialise in social and environmentally responsible investments, and his portfolio wasn't terribly leaning that way. He wouldn't invest in uranium, and he probably didn't invest in oil exploration, but he did have investments in a whole lot of other major companies which probably had alarm bells ringing if you looked at it from an ethical investment point of view. And he asked me to start to work with him on that, but that was very close to the end of his life, and he died before we got that process underway in any way. I was there when he died, which was it's a wonderful thing to be with someone, especially a special person when they die, and that I wasn't actually there at the moment, but I'd been there that evening and was hoping to see him the next morning, but he didn't last the day. But prior to that, he'd set up the NED Foundation, not his name, the Nurturing Evolutionary Development Foundation. Other people gave it a name with the NED name to it, and he gave all of his funds to the foundation as a bequest to continue on his work after he died. It was a very conscious thing that he did. And he wanted me to be the investment manager, so I was employed on a salary, a part-time salary, to manage the investments. And started off, my specialty is in ethical investment equities, but the foundations also needed fixed interest property, so I've taken over that role, treasury bonds, and that's been a learning curve in itself to assess indexed treasury bonds, which I've found very interesting. It doesn't really turn me on, but it's a very interesting thing to get involved with. It was sprung on me. I was at an SDN, and towards the end we got talking about the structure of the NED Foundation, which was a fairly new thing at the time, And Ned said, oh, and Damien's going to be the investment manager of the organisation and he'll join the board, so we should vote him in now. That was very, very Ned. So I did that, and that was probably only 2 or 3 years before he died. So I did have some time on the board with him as one of the board members. In the early days, well, I was the last, up till now, I'm the most recent director. And for a number of years I felt like the young one. But when Ned was alive, it was his money. And he was, we all respected him tremendously. He didn't have a huge ego. He was inclusive. So he pretty much still ran the direction. And other board members to varying degrees, Mary Porter, who was an experienced company director, David Parnell was there, and myself. So we were more involved in the corporate governance, making sure that all the legal things were done correctly. And it was really only when Ned died that we had to pull up our socks, and there were a few years there where we were just floundering around, not in a bad sense, but thinking, right, well, Ned's not here anymore. He's put us in this position to continue on his work. How are we going to do that? His initial idea was that we would employ someone to be a him, and we soon realised, I think, I understand that even prior to his death, they said, well, no, we're not going to be able to get another person just like you. So the idea is we could take the various aspects of work that he was involved with and get different people to work on those aspects in different ways. But it took us, I'd say, a good 2.5 years before we started to feel comfortable. And we didn't do an awful lot in those times. We were just figuring out how the organisation, the NED Foundation, would go ahead. He was really quite a complicated person. I guess there are some people who just have a big heart, and he had a huge heart, and he had an intelligence that went with it. He could be very verbose. He could talk on and on and on at great length, with great intelligence. But perhaps could have shortened it, but that wasn't him. The main part of Ned's legacy is the impact that he had on people when he was alive, and their faith and trust in what his way of working could be carried on. And so there's a little bit of hagiography, is that the word? I sometimes refer to him as St. Ned. As St. Ned used to say, I don't think he would have liked that, but there is a tendency, and I think the organisation over time will move, it has to as the world changes, but at the moment we are still very happy as a board, and I think as most people, well, that I know of, people in the organisation are very happy to look back at what Ned did, the way he worked, even though we apply it in new ways, and we've branched out into new areas, but we still look very much, and we're well aware of his writing. He was a prolific writer, too much so perhaps. Like if he went to a certain event, he would draw up his aims, his objectives, the way that principles should be applied, which was wonderful. But then the next thing he went to, he'd do it again in a slightly different way. So we've got a lot of information, and I guess those first couple of years we spent trying, somewhat unsuccessfully, to distill all that down to a small number of documents, and I don't think that's quite been achieved yet. Yes, Ned has, his spirit is there, as it were. We don't sort of say, oh, what would Ned do in this situation? But I think it's there. We know how he would act. We know that he would make huge leaps of trust in people, and I think perhaps we're a little bit more wary than he would have been. One of the stories that I like about Ned, which it was before I knew him even, it happened, but he was talking to someone about this new idea that was happening over in America about restorative practice, which had grown out of restorative justice. And he said, oh, there's a conference on over there. It'd be really good if we could send someone to go over there. And the person he was talking to said, oh yes, that's a good idea, Ned. And Ned said, right, well, I'll book the plane tickets, and I'll book the conference, and you're leaving in 3 weeks' time. Not quite sure of the time period, but that was the sort of thing. And that set in motion a whole process of people getting involved in it in Australia, of someone coming back. As a person, generally, he was unassuming. He was a little bit tatty, or not tatty, but he wasn't a smart dresser, you could say. He wasn't a tramp by any stretch of the imagination, but quite unassuming. If you see him walking down the street, you wouldn't go, oh, there goes someone with great charisma. He had some funny ideas in a way. He really saw that the civilization is going in the wrong direction. And for instance, when the year 2K came up, and everyone was saying, oh, there's going to be problems, computers won't work. Ned, I think, was quite excited. He thought, this is the big chance. We are finally going to be able to see some real change coming after this, because people will realise that our society has hit a brick wall. And he got food ready for the doomsday time, and I think he was quite disappointed when on the 1st of January things were still pretty normal. So he was a little bit like that. I mean, he wasn't a conspiracy theorist by any means. He definitely wasn't, but he had those little quirks of hoping that things would go a certain way, and even if it was going to be a disaster, he was ready for it. Ned had insight, he was kind, he was intelligent, and he loved people for what they were, and he wanted to make their lives and his own as rich as possible.
That's the episode for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, click the NED Foundation link below the window for more interviews of this kind. And until next time, all the best.